Hey there, I'm Neil. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the host of my new podcast, Pause and Rewind. I'll be chatting to changemakers, thought leaders, and role models who all share a common goal. They're striving to make the world a more inclusive place. And let's face it, we need it. Each guest has a unique story when it comes to doing their thing, and we often know who people are in the now. But how much do we really know about them? Pause and Rewind takes a moment to explore the experiences in my guest's life that led them to where and who they are now. Because everyone loves an origin story. We'll dive into tales, anecdotes, and what makes our guests tick. So, are you ready to pause and rewind? Hey there, and welcome to this episode of Pause and Rewind. I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode because I got the opportunity to sit and chat to the truly awesome human behind the Queer Chameleon, Amee Wilson. If you don't know who the Queer Chameleon is, then get yourself on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube and give them some love. The Queer Chameleon started as a webcomic during lockdown, and for people like myself and so many other people around the world has become a staple in my social media consumption. It is a source of humor, of entertainment, of education, and great, accessible, digestible, meaningful content when it comes to promoting LGBTQ plus acceptance, equality, and lives. And it's just, I was so thrilled when Amee said yes to appearing as a guest on Pause and Rewind because who is the wonderful human behind the Queer Chameleon is something that I wanted to know, and I'm sure it's something that many people will be delighted to hear about. And I was so excited to chat to Amee about her origin story. So listen in and enjoy. Cheers. Hey there, Amee. Welcome to Pause and Rewind.
Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have the Queer Chameleon as a guest on this podcast. I can't even tell you how excited I am.
Unfortunately, I'm not a chameleon, so I'm hoping that's not too disappointing.
Not at all. It is gorgeous to see the person, the genius mind behind the Queer Chameleon. Um, the Queer Chameleon has become, I know we were chatting just before we started this, has become such a staple for me in terms of my Instagram content. So when you said yes, I was absolutely chuffed and no, not disappointed at all. But I did find it really funny that that was part of our chat was I hope you're not too disappointed.
It is so funny because when people contact me sometimes, I think when they see me, they're always a little bit surprised. And I guess it's part of like when you have a character at the forefront of stuff that you make, people tend to visualize in their head the person that might be behind it. So it's always quite interesting when I meet people in real life and they're kind of like, oh, that's who you are, that's who you look like. So sadly not an animated character, but very much just this person.
Well, I am very excited to hear about this person. And to start with, I'd love to ask, what does the world look like for Amee Wilson right now?
So at the moment, I am just living in London with my partner. I'm actually spending most of my time working on said Chameleon, which is very exciting and a decision that I made at the beginning of the year. And so that's really just spending a lot of time drawing the same sort of characters over and over again, spending a lot of time chatting to people and finding out what they want to see from me, but also just trying to be outside. I think now I work on my own. I don't have as much like human interaction as I used to when I worked in an office. So I try and make sure that I'm actually like going out and touching grass and not getting too absorbed with being chronically online.
Chronically online and chameleon interaction.
Yeah, it's a strange life.
It's a strange life, but it's gorgeous. And I'd love to know for those people that are not familiar with the Queer Chameleon, how do you sum it up?
That is a really good question. I think the blurb that I normally give is it's a cartoon character who tackles all things LGBTQIA plus. And it started as a webcomic, which was just like 4 panels, kind of like meme content really to begin with. And then it evolved into like an animated character that has sort of different voices and tells different stories or kind of like teaches different lessons. And by teaches different lessons, I mean it's mainly me learning stuff and then using the chameleon to kind of like tell people what I've learned, and then we all learn together. And it's actually pretty cool because I've learned a lot of stuff along the way too.
I think that there is a lot to be said there. And I always talk about when I am sharing something that is meant to inform or educate and inspire people, that it actually comes from a place of my own learning as well that I want to share with people. And I think there's often this misconception that people feel that they're being preached at, but actually, I just want to bring people along on the journey that I've been on myself.
It's completely that. And the weird thing is when I first started it, it came from a place of kind of like just trying to be a bit more proud about my own identity. And then as the time has gone on, I didn't realize how little I knew, one, about my own label, my own identity. And then it just sort of broke open the walls to how much I didn't know about the rest of the community. Um, and then I guess the approach was like, I want to make sure that I am talking about not just my experience and kind of like the more broad community experience. And then as a result, I'm like, cool, well, if I'm going to do a post about non-binary people, I need to learn more about it, or I need to work with somebody who understands a lot more than I do. And as a result, I'm kind of like, cool, well, I've learned a load of stuff along the way as well. I think people assume that I know absolutely everything because of the way the content looks, but I am literally on the exact same journey as everybody else.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that because I think that that will really resonate with people in terms of their own learning and how they communicate their learning to other people as well. And Queer Chameleon has become full time for you, right?
Almost, I think so. At the moment, I'm looking sort of for a part-time job as well. Because it's the way that social media works. Obviously, you don't really get paid to kind of like put content out there. I've been lucky enough to kind of like work with a couple of different organizations and sort of queer brands to pay my bills basically. But I'm looking at doing potentially some like lecturing and some teaching on the side in marketing and advertising, which is my background. So it'll be sort of like hopefully 75% of my time, and then the rest will hopefully be a little bit more of a guaranteed income.
That's amazing. And in terms of, your skills and expertise, that shines through in the sheer reach that the Queer Chameleon has had, right? And I know that's a bit of a surprise for you.
Just a little bit. Yeah, I didn't really I had no idea that it would ever end up where it has. Like I think when I started it, it was very much a COVID lockdown anxiety project. It was just something to distract me. But I think what happened was the webcomic just resonated because there were just there's a lot of amazing queer content out there, but I guess it was obviously just in a tiny little niche that no one had really touched in terms of being like a cartoon, and also maybe some of the topics that it talked about. But it was TikTok that really kind of like took it further because I taught myself to animate to get onto TikTok, and it just opened up a whole other like I guess possibility of audience and of the content that I could make. And TikTok had just automatically kind of like has much bigger reach. And now I'm here. That's a bit weird.
It's a well, I hope you're able to digest the impact that you're making, through that kind of sometimes what must be a little bit shock, maybe a bit uncomfortable, the impact that you're having. Can I ask a couple of technical questions? But
Yes,
firstly, I just
100%.
want to ask one. Why a chameleon?
Well, yes. People ask me that a lot as well because I think one thing I would say is like I used to always love drawing and drawing animals. I would never have picked a chameleon because they're one of the weirdest animals to draw. But it really came from a different. I had a different webcomic called Anxious Animals, which was actually my first COVID project, and it was basically just like me dealing with lots of thoughts about anxiety and turning them into animals who were sort of talking about them. And one of the comics I did was about coming out because it was just something I was sort of thinking about at the time. And the first comic was literally just two green chameleons, one smaller, one bigger, so you could kind of project whatever you wanted to onto that relationship. And one was like, I've got something to tell you, and it accidentally turns the color of the pride flag, sort of outing themselves. And then the response from the bigger green chameleon is, "And I'm proud of you." And it was just a case of like it was a visual analogy for sort of accidentally kind of like coming out before your words can even say it. And that comic went absolutely whatever the term viral is these days, like. And that's when I realized maybe there was an idea in that. And I guess because we have all of these different visual signals for different parts of the community, the color changing reptile kind of fit quite nicely. And I guess helps simplify some conversations, and I guess that's what I do in a lot of some of the web comics that I make, or even in the videos. It's how to simplify these conversations that might happen between people in the community and people outside of the community, or people within certain groups within the community and the rest of us. So it's sort of meant to be, I guess, like a shortcut, and it's worked better than I probably would have anticipated it would do.
It it is brilliant. It is so accessible in terms of everything from the visuals through to the way you caption. It's so accessible. Like I said, it's a source of entertainment, education, and inspiration. It really is.
Oh, that's so lovely.
No,
Thank you.
absolutely love it. As I say, a staple in my social media content, and it's just wonderful to hear about. How long does it take you to produce kind of per video, per post? Because it must be quite there's the labor that goes into it as well, but there's the creative drain that comes from that.
So it depends. So the web comics are like the static images, like just the
Mm.
illustrations are obviously a lot faster. Obviously, as you kind of said, there's the concepting, coming up with the idea that
Mm.
might take a little bit of time, and working out how to simplify it enough that you can still understand it, but that it's really easy to get. That might take me a couple of hours, not too long. The videos take significantly longer, and that's just because animation is a very slow process. Like a minute video can take me up to 3 days, and that's from like scripting, illustrating the elements. I work with a VO artist if it's my own content, and then actually animating it. And some of the longer videos are very, very time consuming, hence why I also need to kind of like maybe get a part-time job, because it is such a time intensive job. Plus I'm self-taught, very self-taught when it comes to animation, so I would think I'm probably pretty slow as well compared to, I'm sure, industry standard animators.
But it definitely sounds like an absolute labor of love, and one that is just reaching so many people. So you must be super proud.
And I love doing it. Like there are days where you get so frustrated with like the process and tiny little sort of like tiny niggles in the animation, but once I do it and then it's out in the world, and even just for me to see it, I do sometimes forget to feel proud, but I try and go back and look at the things that I've made and force myself to do that, because I'm quite bad at sometimes at acknowledging any kind of accomplishment of mine. So I'm trying to get better at that and be like, actually, that was good. I feel proud of that thing that I created.
Well, this podcast, Pause and Rewind, is all about taking a moment to reflect. And I'm so excited to dive into your origin story that brings us to now. So, are you ready to pause and rewind?
Slightly nervous about it, but yes, let's do it.
Let's do this. Take me back. Tell me all about little Amy.
So I'm a twin. So I have a twin brother. So I grew up with always having him around, and I think uh, as twins are, you sometimes get, compared, and we were actually always very, very different. So he's quite methodical. He's very, very smart. I'm more creative, and so I was always the one that was kind of like drawing and doodling and doing kind of like creative things, and a little bit sporty, tomboy, that kind of thing. But I've just always loved being creative, and I think that weirdly has come out again, sort of, full circle in 20, 30 years later, which I never probably would have anticipated, but I've always been that way since I was a tiny kid.
Amazing. What are some of your favorite anecdotes that you've heard about yourself?
Um, I'm very bad at making decisions. My dad has told me. So if there are two things that I like want to decide between, but I will really want to do both, I just can't make that decision. So apparently I think. I don't know. Let me see if I can remember the story correctly. So I was in trouble at school once for snapping a pencil. I'm assuming because, I was frustrated or something. I was quite young. But outside there were go-karts, and I really wanted to go and play on the go-kart because I'm very competitive as well. But my teacher said, you've done something naughty, so you need to come back during break time, and I need to tell you about this thing that you're not meant to have done. And apparently I just completely ignored her because I wanted to be first to that go-kart, and I wanted to spend my playtime driving around in this go-kart with my friends. So I didn't go, and they contacted my parents because they were like, not only has she been really naughty, but she's also not come and followed up for the consequences of her actions. But I was very single-minded. I was like, actually, no, I want to go and do this instead.
Was it worth it?
Oh, 100%. The go-karts were so fun. They were those little like pedal ones that you get to kind of like drive around the playground. And to be fair, I still absolutely love like driving and racing around and fast cars. So maybe that was a a snapshot of the future as well.
How much of Little Amy do you see now? And obviously quite a lot with the creativity side of things.
More than ever before. So, I mean, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later in terms of the steps I got to get here. But I think looking back now, I'm much more similar to the younger version of me than I have been for the last maybe like 10 years of, or the, you know, the initial part of my
Mm.
career where I was doing different things. And I'm the longer I spend working on my own project and my own creativity, the more I see it. So I feel quite lucky that I'm able to kind of chase that and actually be sort of fulfilling that part of myself.
That's so interesting that you said that. It's a common theme that comes up on Pause and Rewind,
Mm.
around how people as they get older they feel more in touch with that childlike self, and I definitely feel that in terms of my own creativity, um, the way I dress, my imagination, my sense of play and wonder.
Yeah, I think it's a and I feel it's cliche because I know everyone talks about it, but as you get older and you realize that you have free will,
Yeah,
and that you don't have to worry as much about whether you're doing what people expect of you, you do defer to kind of like the core part of yourself, which
yeah.
is for me like just being a bit more playful and a bit more creative. But the kind of like the processes we go up until before then, when we're in jobs that we don't necessarily resonate with, we ignore that and we push those bits down. So it's nice just to feel like it's coming back a bit.
Absolutely. What were you like at school? From the sounds of it, a little bit
Well,
naughty, creative.
I think I then changed when I got to high school. I think I was always in trouble for like being talkative and chatty and
Same.
yeah but I think it's just because school was when you hang out with friends, you don't necessarily have to listen. But I was a bit of a daydreamer as well, and the artistic side of me I think definitely continued all the way through my high school. I used to get in trouble regularly for just drawing all over my work. So, and I remember reading a study not that long ago where they showed that drawing can help you maintain your concentration.
Yeah.
They did a study with people like on a phone call, and the people that were allowed to doodle and draw retained information better. So I maintain that while my teachers were like, she's not paying attention, she's drawing, I was actually listening.
Yep.
I was just also doodling all over my work at the same time.
I'm the same. I've got a pen in my hand right now, and I have a mouse mat next to me that I'm making little shapes on. And I draw little characters. I used to love drawing as a kid. That's disappeared, but I it definitely helps with my concentration. So
It's
I think you're
I
right.
think it's a fact, and I think that like we see like people see concentration as very everybody look it looks the same for everybody, but it's 100% not the case. And I still doodle now. Same with you. Like if I'm on calls with people, it's I'm definitely still paying attention, but
Mm.
it's a way of kind of like calming my mind, I think.
Yeah, it's when I'm not doing anything with my hands and
Yeah, that you're like
I'm
zoned
glazed
out
over that.
completely.
Yeah, I'm not in the room. I'm not in the room. Um, in terms of school, then that creativity ran through. Did you know what you wanted to do?
Well, yes, I think I was obsessed with Disney and like animation way back then, like in the time of like videos and stuff. Like Mulan was one of my most watched videos. But the school that I was at, and I think schooling in general, you don't get taught that like creativity or art really is a job. Like you're very much kind of pushed towards, well, these are the things that are a vocation, that these are things that you should do. And so at the same time, I really loved animals. And so I was like, oh, maybe I want to be a vet, even though I sucked at biology, sucked at chemistry, really sucked at maths. Um, I was like, yeah, maybe this is a really good idea. And so I kind of like tried to force myself into kind of that direction. And so I kind of did all of the subjects that would lead me into that career. Ultimately, it was silly because I was definitely not good enough at any of them because I wasn't where my passion really lay. And I actually ended up not even I didn't get the grades that you need to go and become a vet. But in hindsight, I think it's actually a bit of a blessing because I think I was just choosing it because I loved animals, and ultimately if you speak to any vet it's not enough really. Love
No.
of animals isn't what will necessarily get you through. There's a lot more to it than that. So I ended up doing something completely different.
What was that?
English language and linguistics. It was like
Okay.
my other love was sort of English and writing and stuff like that. So I had one other A level that was English language, and I did a complete like 180 when it got to my university applications. Having written my like UCAS forms and all that sort of stuff for vet science, I did a complete 180. I was like, nope, I want to go and do English language and linguistics, and got in to do that. But it was very much a kind of a choice because I felt like I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I hadn't really been pursuing anything artistic as a result because it was just I just used to draw in my spare time. So I was like, well, I better go to uni because everybody's going to uni, right? That's what you should do. And so I went and did something that was a little bit sort of related to what I'd been doing at school, sorry, but I didn't really have a love for it, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think a lot of us go through that. If you're not, I think unless you want to be a vet or a doctor or a lawyer, it actually you're kind of in a bit. What do you do? Like I ended up doing psychology. I've never touched it again. But yeah, it's not always it's not always obvious. And also, we're so young to be making those decisions.
Yeah. And I think you also don't really understand what work is or what jobs actually are.
Hmm.
Because I think even back then, like there was a graphic design course. I'm sure I actually ended up doing some graphic design later in life, and I'm sure I would have loved it back then. But I don't think, and this my parents didn't really understand what the other jobs were out there. They very much just wanted to make sure that we had good jobs and like good direction. But they would only really have ever had experience of what they did themselves. They wouldn't have
Yeah.
been they weren't able to kind of like help you shape it. And schools really ultimately are, you know, they're systems that are based on the performance of what they put out. So they don't really necessarily focus on the individual and what's actually going to make the individual happy or anything like that. It's very much like what's a good job that's going to make our school look good, which
Yeah.
obviously impacts the choices you make.
Absolutely. I like to think it's changing more now though with
I really hope
with
so.
social media for young people and being able to pursue their dreams because I know that it's not something I felt I could do. Um, how old were you? Well, and what did the world look like when you first gained your sense of self in the world, where you looked and looked around you and thought, this is my place in the world?
So I think it's a really interesting question because I feel like as you go through life, it maybe happens a couple of different times in different
Hmm.
ways. Because I don't think I really had a sense of self when I was at high school. I mean, maybe not many people do, but I think, and there's a lot wrapped up in maybe identity and queerness and to do with that as well. Because I didn't really know anything about queer people or any queer people when I was at uni, at high school, sorry. But I think I kind of just sort of muddled through life for a little bit. And it wasn't until I went to university and I joined a rugby team that I suddenly met all of these queer people who were really sort of quite comfortable with themselves. And I think suddenly I started to feel a little bit more like myself and
Yeah.
like I could be myself more openly. And that was probably the first time that I'd felt that. I had friends before that in my personal life in high school, towards the end of high school, where I'd started to feel that, but it was sort of very sporadic just when I saw them. Whereas when I was at uni, it was kind of like all day, every day, my friendship circle, and that started to sort of shape me, I think, a little bit. But there's a whole self-discovery, even that, even when you first realize you're queer and like who am I in the queer community? Like who what does that look like? And that's a whole other discovery process that I think can take quite a long time.
Oh, definitely. And it's changed so much with so many identities and labels. And I'm not talking necessarily about the LGBTQ plus wider umbrella. I'm talking about the internal ones. Like, you know, it's quite hard to, I don't really, I still don't really resonate with any of them.
No, and I think sometimes you can feel like you're not enough if you don't know which one you
Mm,
fit into. And then if you do think you align with one, if you don't necessarily look the way that that particular bracket might expect you to look. And I think, and this is something that's very interesting about queer community as well. Sometimes I do worry because obviously it focuses a lot on kind of like labels and the flags are associated with, and sometimes, the funny memes. But ultimately, it's only ever labels and words we use are only ever a loose guide to help you on
yeah.
discovery. Like as long as we don't treat them as facts and police people, that's when it becomes a problem, I think. And when you start to go, cool, well, I feel like I'm mask, for example, it's like, but mask can look however you want to look as
Yeah,
mask.
for sure. For sure.
I think we need to get better at making sure that people, when they first come into the community, understand that it's not as sort of concrete as sometimes it maybe looks.
No, this is one of the things I love the most about the reclamation of the word queer though, and why queer chameleon that is the queer chameleon because that is comfortable for me now, having reclaimed it from being a kid that was born in the 80s and then grew up in the
Yeah.
90s. Like, yeah.
Same, and I think I chose it because it also I feel quite comfortable with it as well, and maybe and definitely for different reasons. I think I'm bisexual, but for a long, long time, the word bisexual and the connotations of bisexual can be very challenging, especially within the community. And queer is sometimes a safer label, but I also now have a real affinity with the label, and I enjoy using it, but with the recognition that it's not necessarily that way for everybody, and some people
Yeah.
do still feel, understandably, quite a visceral reaction to it.
Oh, definitely when it's been weaponized, definitely, for me, my teenage years. Speaking of teenage years, little segue there. Let's jump back a little bit. What does teenage life look like for you? Because for many of us, first heartbreak, changes in our bodies, maybe those slight first realizations that we're different. I think we know we're different from a younger age, to be fair.
Yeah.
I certainly did, but didn't have the language and terminology for it. But what does teenage years look like for you?
So I think so. I actually went to a single sex school. I went to a girls' school, and as a result, I think I was thrown into a very heteronormative kind of world. Whereas, like in my primary school, I was a tomboy. I was very comfortable and kind of not really fitting into any group or bucket or anything like that. I'm very, very happy. And then I think when I moved into a very different environment, it kind of confused me for a very long time. And didn't really understand who I was, I think, as a result. And I'm pretty sure Section 28 was still in place at the beginning of my high school years. And I had no idea, no concept of queer people, queer life, anything. The word bisexual was definitely not in the vocabulary. It was like people were bullied, and oh, you're gay was an insult, but that was kind of the end of it. So I feel like I followed suit with like always having a crush on a boy, always wanting a boyfriend or having a boyfriend, at various different points. But at the same time, having absolute obsessions with female TV characters, TV stars. My English teacher I was obsessed with for like years and years and years, which I think is very stereotypical now looking back on it. Um, but I didn't understand that. Like I
Mm.
had, we had homework diaries that used to like, if you were particularly creative, you would like plaster with pictures and stuff like that and design. And obviously people would make them look quite girly. I literally just had pictures of women all over mine. And it was just like, I was just a big fan at the time. But I think ultimately what happened was I started listening to Pink, the singer. And obviously, she isn't queer herself, but she has a massive queer following.
Mm.
And I joined a forum, and I feel like this is maybe also something that's quite familiar to a lot of people in the community. But I think finding online groups and finding people within those spaces opens you up to a very, very different group of people. And I made a load of friends on this forum. Some were queer, some were not, and they became a friendship circle outside of my school life. And that I think completely just opened my eyes. And I met a girl, and she had a boyfriend also at the time, and we were just really, really good friends. But I think both of us were suddenly like, I'm confused, I'm feeling these feelings, what is going on? And I think we both had boyfriends at the time. Those relationships both ended separately, and then eventually we sort of ended up getting together, and all of our friends within this particular group with these Pink fans were like, we all saw it like way, way before both of you did. Like, we're not surprised that this has happened, but she became my first girlfriend, and at that point, I'd started to get online and research and just do a bit of self-discovery, and had realized that I was like, hang on, all of these feelings, all of this suddenly makes sense. I'm bisexual. This makes sense. Um, and so I went to uni with that no, that knowledge and that relationship initially. Unfortunately, the relationship didn't work out, but I at least had started to understand myself a little bit more, and why I didn't feel like I'd ever really fit in with my friendship
Mm.
group at school, because there was just so, I mean, ironically, some of them have also now come out later in life as queer, but it was just not something that was spoken about at school, and so I feel like we just never really had that opportunity to figure it out.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I love that it was a love of pink that that brought you to where you are.
Oh, I tell you, there was a well, I say funny, it wasn't funny at the time, but there was a moment where I don't know if you would have had these as well, but at one point there were these email quizzes that used to go around where you'd answer like 40 different
Was
questions.
it the BuzzFeed type
They were
ones?
kind of like BuzzFeed, but they were ones that you'd send to your friends. So you just
Okay.
fill in the answers, and there was all sorts of questions on there. But I remember there was this really late, just a little bit later. So I'd sort of started to figure out who I was, but I don't think I'd actually realized at that point. This was before the pink stuff. But one of the questions was like, do you like boys and do you like girls separately? And I think I answered yes to both. I don't remember if I knew what I was doing. But it was, and I had a boyfriend at the time. I'm sure I was maybe like 13 or 14, but this quiz was actually a trick and it was set up so it sent your answer straight back to the person that sent it to you. And so for months after that, people were like, oh my God, you're a lesbian, you're gay, or all of this sort of stuff. And I remember at the time being terrified because I was like, wait, I've just been caught out. And at the time, I was like, oh, I've got a boyfriend. I'm not. But I remember back then that I must have realized and just, very
Yeah.
naively was just putting it into the quiz because I was like, no one's going to know. And I was just answering purely on what I felt
Yeah.
without really knowing the words or what I was answering. And obviously, girls are mean, so the stuff that happened afterwards was, not ideal, but it was a moment of kind of, I think back then I knew, but I just
Mm.
didn't have the words really to describe it. And obviously, as soon as girls start picking on you, you just deny. You're
Yeah.
like, no, I don't want to
Of
open.
course. I think for so many of us, the easiest thing to do is to deny it. I denied it for quite a long time. That is a horrendous experience to happen so young. Like what? Yeah.
Girls are evil. Well, I mean, kids in general can
Yeah.
be. But I think, and I'm sure it wasn't intended. I doubt that they thought they were going to get any particularly
Of course.
interesting information. So I'm sure it was like a very exciting moment for them.
Yeah.
But
What?
at the time, not that enjoyable. But
That's a horrible quiz development as well. Like
I
that's
know. Really though, but yeah, I think I was under the radar. Other than that, for a long, long time, it wasn't people knew just as we were leaving because I had a girlfriend and
Mm,
I was the only person in the year to have a girlfriend. But by that point, I was on my way out and I just didn't really care.
yeah, fair enough. And then uni, you got to settle into yourself and meet other people.
Yeah, it took me a little while. I didn't actually join the rugby club until the second year.
Hmm.
And the first year I did experience a little bit of, I would say, internalized biphobia because I got to uni and then it was like kind of starting secondary school all over again, back in a world of, well, I didn't know any queer people, so I was sort of forced back into this space of
Mm,
feeling like I had to fit in. And so I think my relationship ended, which wasn't actually related to that. But I think I joined a different sports team, but it was while it was gendered sports, they joined together quite a lot. So there was a lot of kind of like shared socials. And I think I sort of faded back into myself because I was like, oh, I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know how to come out. And again, being bisexual, it's quite difficult to have that conversation
yeah,
sometimes. And so I think I went back into the closet for probably about 9 months and dressed how I thought people wanted me to dress and sort of kind of like went back because I just wanted acceptance.
yeah,
Um, and so it took joining that rugby team for me to go, wait a second. And I found all that comfort that I'd originally felt the first time when I found all those friends through the forum. And I went from zero to I want to try and look as queer as possible because that's how I felt you need to be. You go through that process of how do I identify myself as queer? So I cut off all my hair, as you do, and dated more people and became a lot more confident in myself. But it did take a little while at university to find those people where I felt I could be authentic, which I think is a constant battle for lots of people in the community.
for sure. How much of that experience do you feel you put into the queer chameleon?
I think a fair bit. I think I try because I want it also to be accessible for lots of people. I don't focus too much on purely one identity, but
Mm,
specifically when I talk about anything of to do with bisexuality, it's generally stuff that I've
yeah,
experienced. A lot to do with kind of I have dated biphobic lesbians as well, and so there is an element of like there's personal experiences that come in specifically when I do talk about that type of content, because I do want it to still feel real.
mm,
But
Yeah.
equally, like I don't want it to just be just my experience. I kind of still want other people to be able to identify with it, which is why I touch on broader topics too.
For sure, and the coming out experience generally, and that acceptance of belonging, that goes way beyond just the LGBTQ plus experience in
100%.
itself. So I think that's a lot of why it resonates with people. Thank you for so much for sharing. What happens next?
I was there for 3 years. I went to York, and I was doing this obviously course that I just sort of fell into. And I graduated, and I had no idea what I wanted to do next because I'd obviously just picked a random course.
Mm.
So I did two things. I applied to join the RAF.
Okay.
I'll come back to that in a second. And then I also applied for a marketing like grad scheme because I was like trying to go back into my creative roots. And I was like, oh, like this grad scheme feels like it's sort of coming up with TV ads. That sounds very exciting. And luckily I didn't get into the RAF, which I'm very, very grateful for. But I did get into this grad scheme, but it didn't start for a year. So I was a waitress for a year. I used to work at Pizza Hut the whole time I was at uni to live to pay for everything, and so I just went back to full-time waitressing and working and cutting pizzas while I waited for my new job to start. And then and then I got into marketing, and so I did that for a couple of years.
And did you
But
enjoy
not
it?
making TV ads at the same time. Well, no, because I think what happened was I got into it thinking it was like advertising, but marketing is actually very different. It's sort of
Mm.
like, you're generally speaking, you're organizing lots of other people who are doing the doing, and you could like see the big picture. Whereas I'm quite hands-on and I like to be creative, and ultimately you're normally briefing other people to do the creative stuff and then managing it from there. So I realized quite quickly that I'd kind of gone into slightly the wrong field, which is how I then got into advertising. I was like, oh, hang on, I want to be over there. I want to be doing that thing. So I actually went and moved to Australia to do a course, to do a graphic design course.
That's a big move to do a course.
Yeah, well, it's not as exciting as it sounds because I'm actually half Australian. So my mum is Australian, and she was living over there at the time with my dad, and so I actually at the age of like 25 or 26, I moved back in with my parents.
Okay.
Um,
Experience in itself.
yes, we lasted about 6 months, 9 months before we definitely realized it was not going to work, and I needed to move out. But I was very lucky that they allowed me to do that because to do the course, I couldn't be working. It was a full-time course, and so ultimately, like, if I hadn't have had that. The reason I went to Australia was the course exists in a couple of different places, but it's expensive and it's also full time. So I could not afford to stay in London, do the course and not work because it's just not definitely not feasible. Whereas I just moved back in on their couch for about 3 months to do the course, and then I got a job and eventually moved out again
Okay.
for the second time.
And did the course get you to where you wanted to be?
It did, yeah. So, I mean, the reason I did it was you need a portfolio if you want to work in advertising to show that you can make stuff. And this, I was already kind of self-taught on a lot of the programs because, like I've sort of mentioned, I've always done stuff in my spare time that's kind of like artistic-y kind of led. But I needed to kind of like actually understand how the industry worked, how the industry tools were used, and develop a bit of a body of work. So, the 3 months was like full time, really intensive, but really like the best 3 months of my life. It was so much fun. And it got me into an advertising agency as a designer. So it was a bit of a gamble because I could have ended up, not getting a job and just being like, cool, well, I'll go back to marketing. But I was quite lucky that I did find a job, and they hired me, and I sort of, it was quite a few steps back. I'd got to like marketing manager level in my previous job, but I was actually really passionate about changing industries. So I went and I pivoted slightly and went in as a studio designer, which is sort of one beneath a graphic designer. But it was really good because you learn a lot of like how the systems work
Yeah,
because you see it from you're the last person in the process, but it means you see how the process works right up until the end. So it's actually quite good for developing those like formative skills.
absolutely. Taking a step backwards is sometimes necessary in terms of moving
Mm.
forwards, and being able to pivot is key. What were you doing around the time that Queer Chameleon came about?
So when I was I'd moved to Australia at this point, so I was still in Australia. I'd moved to Sydney, and I kind of had worked at a couple of different advertising agencies. And if I'm honest, didn't love it, and not because I didn't love the work, but advertising as an industry itself can be a little bit toxic for lots of different reasons, like very extreme working hours, um,
Mm.
not particularly diverse workforce, and sort of different elements like that. And so I had applied to join another scheme. It was at Google called Rare. And it was basically a scheme that is designed to kind of diversify the tech industry. It's set up by an amazing queer creative called Tara McKenty, and she had started this program to kind of like fix the problem, basically the problem that I'd been experiencing at these different ad agencies. So I didn't think I'd ever get in because it's also very like very cool job. Lots of people wanted it, but I did, and I would say that that actually was the thing that probably inspired, like that job was probably what inspired Queer Chameleon, because I had never really worked in a place where I was being told to actively embrace that part of myself and to like to hero it and bring it to work. And I had always really, probably, if I'm honest, hidden my sexuality for the entirety of my career because I'd never really had queer leaders or been around queer people who were out at work. And so I wouldn't talk about my partner. I wouldn't really talk about what I did at the weekend because I just didn't feel comfortable. And then it was a complete 180. When I got there, she would talk about her wife and her kids. And I was encouraged to kind of like bring all of the thinking and all of my perspective into my work. And I suddenly was like, hey, I'm really proud of who I am. I'm really proud of being bisexual. And I think I was making all of these comics in my spare time. And I think that like being in that environment was the thing that actually even inspired me to make that comic in the first place.
Amazing. That sense of belonging and what that has led to.
It was a massive pivotal change. I think not even just for Queer Chameleon, but me, I think.
You.
Like I now talk a lot more vocally about it to my friends or like on my own like personal social media, to my family. Um I think at that point I became more proud and passionate and like wanting to even like be an activist and wanting to talk about things because I think before I was just sort of existing before.
Yeah, and you said earlier how those moments of realizations of self and your place
Mm.
in the world come at various times. It sounds like that was a really key one for you.
I think so, and that's why I was sort of saying those moments because I feel like it happened maybe a little bit here and there, but I
Yeah,
think it was where I am now feels the most realist version of that,
yeah.
and where I feel the happiest with what I'm doing as well, or at least what I'm trying to do.
Amazing. Well, I love what you're trying to do. Are you happy to talk about maybe someone who's shaped you the most along the way?
I would say, to be honest, it probably was Tara. And I think she also, as a creative leader, has always been someone who was like pushes pushes you to do things that are scary and to try and find ideas that make you a little bit nervous to put out in the world. And I think that really comes to life still with the stuff that I do now because I'm a people pleaser by nature. So I actually find it very hard sometimes, especially now that I have the audience has grown. I worry about stuff that I put out. I second guess it all the time. I'm always thinking, what if I say the wrong thing, or what if I offend somebody? And I think her approach to how she kind of like um mentored the group of us that were in there was kind of, if people are talking about something, then that's great. Like you need to be doing things to get people's attention. Um to be able to have positive impact. And I think I try that has really shaped me, trying to be a bit braver and being like, if I make a mistake, that's okay. I can, you can fix it and you can work out how to improve next time. But if you worry and don't do it in the first place, you've got no chance.
I love that. I love that. And look at where this bold idea has taken you.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Does happiness and success look and feel how you thought it would?
Um, so it's interesting because I think it's a deep question because I
Mm,
think happiness is a really complex idea, and I probably would say, and I don't maybe it's a British thing. I think I struggle to find happiness because I think a natural cynic and natural skeptic,
I get it.
um, but I am finding more moments of happiness now that I'm working for myself, and doing something that I feel on the whole is hopefully doing something good. So I feel like this is what it does feel to be happy with the work that you're doing. I don't see myself as successful, but I don't know. I sometimes like think that's really interesting because I think success is looks so different for different people. I still see myself in success. I see myself as successful in that I've managed to kind of like continue doing one project for a long period of time. Like I've always had an issue with starting projects and having big ideas and never having any follow through.
I hear you.
Yeah, I have a million projects. Like, yeah, I'm well aware that there's lots of unfinished things in my life, but this is the first one I have actually succeeded at sticking with, and it has been, received positively. So I try and see that as like that. Actually, I didn't think that's what success would look like. It's actually just me being consistent, and sticking to something. And actually, I'm quite happy with that. I'm managing to like not get distracted, and so I think that for me, I'm glad that that's what success feels like. It's actually just sticking to it and keeping at it.
Yeah, I learned that fairly recently in the last couple of years. It was actually listening to Brené Brown talk about consistency versus intensity. And that changed my thinking quite a lot when I realized that that was key.
Yeah, because I think it can feel like it's like if you think about it as the steps you're taking, it doesn't really feel like much, but the
Yeah.
little steps all do actually add up to something. And I think I probably haven't really taken that approach for most of my life, and I think it shows that I've sort of like career hopped and not
Yeah.
stuck at it for very long. But this is the first one where I have just done that, just small consistent things, and it is paying off. So it's obviously a way to approach things that can work out if you apply it in the right way.
Absolutely. It's just getting it's just learning that is not so easy.
Yeah.
My final question for this segment is, what are you most proud of today?
Um, so can it be something that's not actually happened yet, but it's in
Yeah.
the process of? Okay, cool. So I reached out to an organization that I've done some work with previously called It Gets Better. So they're for people who are listening who maybe don't know, it's I think they're a not-for-profit, but they're very much focused on sort of supporting queer youth with like mental health. That's something I'm very, very, very passionate about. And the thing with kind of like running a page or content creation or whatever is, working with brands is sometimes a way to, be paid for the work that you were doing. And so I actually approached them with an idea because I wanted to make a series that was about advice, because I get asked regularly for advice from quite a lot of young people, and I'm definitely not professionally equipped to answer it, no matter how much I would love to. And equally, like I've mentioned before, animation takes a really long time. So I approached them with this idea that I want to create a short series called Dear Queer Chameleon, where people can write in and sort of say, ask for some advice. That's something very specific about what it is they're experiencing. And then we will create a video where the chameleon basically gives advice, and then also maybe gets, a little bit of help from other professionals who where and when it might make sense, if it's about transition or if it's about pretty much anything depending on what they write in. And I didn't expect them to go for it because it was very much an open sort of like, I've had an idea. Please, will you pay me money to make this come to life? And also, would you like to work with me? And they said yes. So we're in the process of sort of trying to get that made. It was not going to be a very long series. It's just going to live on YouTube and probably, a couple of episodes. But that's something that I feel hopefully will have a real impact if we can make it work.
The House of Happiness is London's ultimate sober clubbing extravaganza. We're led and delivered but created for all, whether teetotal, sober curious, or just taking a booze snooze. We love a day rave, and on a Saturday afternoon you can expect banging house tunes, DJs on decks, dancers on podiums, and a fully stocked alcohol-free bar. Flamboyant, bold, with a glitter station to boot. We're all about safe, inclusive fun, and we even have a pre-meet so that you can make new sober buddies before you hit the dance floor. Grab your tickets from Instagram now at House of Happiness Official, and we'll see you on the dance floor. Are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Okay, yes, I'm prepared-ish.
What album, book, or movie has had a lasting impact on you?
Okay, so the book I would say is probably Dr. Julia Shaw wrote a book on bisexuality, and it was the first book I ever read about my identity. I started getting really into kind of just like actually trying to read around stuff once I started Queer Chameleon, and it was so significant because I suddenly realized how a lot of the things that I had felt or experienced weren't just kind of like me. And I think that's a common experience for everybody, but there's not that much out there on bisexuality in the same way. It's something that's it's growing massively
Yeah.
because I think more and more people are starting to be, be given the opportunity to talk about it. But just reading the history of it and kind of like where a lot of people's misconceptions, even some of my own, like internalized biphobia comes from, was absolutely incredible. I highly recommend reading it. I think it's called The Bisexual, The Hidden. I think I'm sure you can pop it in the notes
Yeah.
after this, but it's the one that she's written and it was just phenomenal. And then the album, going back to my story about like discovery and like finding that forum online, was actually probably Pink, I'm Not Dead. And
I was
I,
hoping you were going to say that.
I still I love the album to this day. I've always loved I loved her music, but I think ultimately that album was what led me to discovering the forum, which led me to discovering, all of these people and parts of myself. And so I think that album will very much still have a place in my heart in terms of my discovery, even though she's not queer. She's obviously probably, I would say, responsible for lots of people discovering certain things about
Hell yeah.
themselves.
What an ally as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is.
How about a movie?
Movie. Well, my favorite movie is Billy Elliot, and I actually think that ironically, well, not ironically, that doesn't surprise me looking back now, because I think it was very much about somebody, defying expectations and eventually also seeing that acceptance, from his dad at the end when, actually not to ruin it in case no one's seen it, but there's beautiful moments with his dad just kind of accepting this thing that he wants to do that isn't necessarily what they would expect from a boy who lives in this particular area. And it's also just, it's a beautiful film in
It
general.
is.
I
It's a
think
cracking film. Cracking film.
it's just that story has always stayed with me.
Yeah. I saw the stage show as well, actually, which was quite good. Bit long, but the film's
The
better.
kids are incredible. The dancers in that, it's just
Yeah.
actually real.
It was amazing. What's been the best adventure of your life so far?
I think living abroad, I mean, although although I technically obviously started it on my parents' couch, and that probably takes away from it being quite as like daring. I did then they moved back home. I feel like they're trying to get away from me at this point, but they having to then sort of exist and make new friends and also work in a new place for I was there for about 5 years in the end. I think was an amazing experience. Obviously, a very privileged one. I didn't need a visa. I was lucky that I had a passport, but it did encourage me to kind of like take the opportunity to reinvent myself a bit. And I think again, I also became a different type of person and a different part of myself when I was over there as well. So I think being able to put yourself in a completely different environment was a pretty incredible opportunity.
No, it really is. I mean, travel brings out so much in us that we don't realize, especially when you do it by yourself. It's quite exciting. What three words would you use to describe you and your origin story?
Um, Full circle moment.
Full circle moment.
Yeah, because I think looking back when I said, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an animator. And in my mind, that was like, working on Disney films. And weirdly, what, like 20 something years later, I'm now animating a character and working with a VO artist to do it. Like that weirdly feels like I've sort of ended up doing the thing that I wanted when I was, really, really young. I want to say like 9, 10. So I feel like I accidentally sort of have lived, I'm trying to live out my childhood dream a little bit later.
Well, not trying, you're doing it. That's incredible. Not many people get to say that.
True. Yes. And so, well, ask me again in a year's time and see where I'm at. But, hopefully still at least doing something similar, even if it's not chameleon related.
I just love how all of the different things and maybe different kind of like directions that you went in, be it from the love of animals and wanting to be a vet through to the English, the marketing and advertising, has all culminated as part of that first full circle moment.
I agree. I think completely. And I think that's the one thing that I feel like we don't get taught, but actually has had that positive effect. Is like, I think doing different things and doing and like pivoting and completely reinventing yourself sometimes is
Yeah.
ever a bad thing. I think I've managed to take something from each of those things and it's like mixed together in a massive cake bowl and this weird like character has popped out. But I don't think I would have been able to do any of the stuff I've done without, bits from all of those journeys. So I think you're
Yeah.
100% right.
And what a beautiful result is all I'm going to say. Let's fast forward a little bit. What exciting things do you have coming up? You've already shared one of them, which I'm very grateful for.
I think it's more what plans I have to hopefully kind of keep building the platform. So I think what I would like to do is I did a little bit of it recently for some fundraising for a family in Palestine, and I kind of used the platform and a brand that had approached me to make a sort of a spin-off card game to raise some money. And I realized the power of when we all kind of work together, you can actually do great things and make some change. And so I'm hoping to kind of do more fundraising and do use the power of the audience that I've sort of has materialized to kind of continue to give back to the community, because I think it can be very easy to kind of get caught up in just doing the day to day and trying to like obviously stay afloat as an artist and as a creator. But I don't want to kind of I still want to keep actually having an impact and not just kind of like
Yeah.
videos. So that's something that I'm hoping to do. Some more interesting fundraising, because I also think the more creative you get with it, the more people want to support as well. So watch this space. I've got a few ideas. And then also I want to work with more people. So I try to collaborate as often as I can, especially on topics and areas that I don't have any ideas about and don't want to just rely on kind of my own research. And so I've got a few exciting sort of collaborations coming up with other sort of creators and content creators who have sort of agreed to like work together on something. So hopefully some of those will actually come to fruition as well.
That's cool. I was actually when you were talking about your fundraising, I saw that. I thought it was brilliant, and I loved your collaboration with Trans Youth for Loved as well. And yeah, it's amazing when the power of creativity and collaboration when the community come together.
Yeah, and also if there is anyone listening who wants to collaborate, like and or wants to like raise awareness about something, my DMs are always open. If I don't always reply, I don't take it personally. I just get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But I always want to do that, and I think sometimes people think, oh, I can't contact her because she'll never reply. But I try and work with
Hey,
absolute.
you did to me. Do you know what I
I
mean?
did, yeah,
Like, and I was
exactly.
so
I'm
grateful
in
for
there.
it.
I'm just, it might
Yeah.
just be one of those days where I'm just like, there's just too much going on. But I want to kind of work with people who are trying to do the same things that I am. So, please reach out.
Putting it right out there. Get in touch. Love
Yes,
it.
literally.
Amy, what brings you joy?
Um, at the core, I like escapism. I'm not so good at it these days, but I used to be like a massive bookworm, like completely escaping into a different world. And I think that's one of my love of like cartoons as well, because it's that kind of like trying to step away from what can sometimes be quite overwhelming. And my love of animals still exists. Like I'm a crazy cat lady, like without the cats. So I don't actually have any cats of my own yet. I've always had cats up until the last couple of years, but I absolutely adore like being around animals and if sort of just generally sort of patting people's dogs, even if that I haven't really worked out if they're going to like me yet.
Well, you are welcome to. You're welcome to meet my grumpy old pug Pugsley anytime.
Oh my God, Pugsley, that's
Yes.
incredible.
I've never met another pug called Pugsley, and I know that's really unbelievable. And I know when we named him, it was like we're gonna meet loads. We've never met one, but
That's
he's yeah,
iconic. What a great name.
yeah. Well, you're welcome to. I'll bring him round. We'll bring
Dog
him
sit.
round. What takeaways do you have for anyone listening wanting to put something out there that really promotes the spirit of inclusion and belonging and acceptance?
Um, do it for the first thing. So I think it's as in like you can have an idea for a really, really long time, and I think you can overthink it, or you can spend a
Mm,
long time working on it. That is me to a T. I will overthink it up until the point that I'll unsell it in my mind and then I just won't do it. So sometimes it's like if you think you have a good idea, just make something, even if it's not polished or anything like that, just put it out there. And then don't be disheartened if it doesn't go as far as you think it should go, because the algorithms and the way the internet works and the way social media works never reflect the content really and the heart behind something. And ultimately, unfortunately for the community, are generally stacked against us,
yeah,
just in the way that censorship works. So also don't take numbers and likes and shares and stuff like that as a reflection of your work or your idea, and don't let it stop you. Um, and then collaborate, look for support. Like I feel like even we're obviously in London and there's a great community here, but try and find other people who are doing similar things to you, because that coming together has a massive impact. And most of the time people will want to work with you. We all want to work together. So don't be afraid to reach out, because most people will say yes if you're kind of trying to do the same message.
I love that. I'm taking some of that advice on board personally right now. Finally, what words of encouragement or wisdom do you have for anyone out there to help them get to wherever they're going?
We're all on the same journey. And I feel like we all feel like we're never there. But actually, I don't think that there is an end point. And it is literally just as cliche as it sounds. I'm trying to be more in the moment and enjoy the things, looking back and being like, look what I've achieved. So sometimes it's good to actually just exist in the place that you are right now and not worry too much about getting to where you're going, because I think we can get very caught up on that, and then it stops us kind of like wanting to do anything else. So I think it's actually just being proud of what you've achieved, and being grateful for where you've got to, because I think otherwise it can be quite paralyzing, I think, to be thinking too far ahead. This is me trying to give myself words of advice at this point, but yeah,
Like
definitely
we
being
said at
in.
the beginning, we're all on a journey and we're talking to ourselves and learning
Yeah.
ourselves as much along the way. Finally, give a plug for Queer Chameleon. Like where can people find you? What can people expect in the future? The plug the book. The book.
Oh yeah, yeah. There is a book. I that wasn't really a plan, but I was they came to me. I did actually think it was a scam email when they first messaged me, because I didn't think it was real. But yeah, there is a book. It's just a group of the like different web comics that you can find on Instagram, and it's available from generally from like the usual places. But I would really please, if you're going to get it, look to support queer indie retailers like Queerlit in Manchester, Gaze the Word Bookshop, all of those places. And if they don't have it, I'm sure they might be able to get it in. So yes, please, give that a read if you can. And then you can find me in all the really normal places: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. YouTube is where that series will probably live, the one we were talking about earlier, which is the longer form stuff. So if it all goes ahead, hopefully, fingers crossed, there'll be a couple of sort of longer form videos on there, which hopefully, even if it's not an issue that you necessarily feel connected to, you might get something out of those videos.
Amee, I am so grateful. Thank you for stepping out from behind a gorgeous queer comedian. I have loved this time with you, and I can't wait to see you in person soon.
Thank you so, so much for having me. It's been an absolute blast.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
And there you have it, the creator of The Queer Chameleon. I hope that you enjoyed that episode. I loved chatting to Amee about her full circle moment, the three words that she uses to describe her and her origin story. How starting as a kid, her love of animation and Disney, 20 years later, through thinking that she wanted to be a vet, through to her love of animals, and then a career in marketing and advertising and education around English lit, and how all of that has culminated in her full circle moment 20 years later to animating a character that is touching so many like people's lives and educating people and bringing so much joy. It was great to hear Amee talk about reinvention, and how that has been that reinvention and her ability to pivot has led her to where she is. And it really resonated with her about how she uses the queer chameleon to share her learning journey when it comes to LGBTQ issues herself as part of the community, and the way she uses that to educate herself and to show up. And that's definitely something that touches me in terms of, how I deliver events and the content that I put out there, because a lot of it stems from my own learning and then wanting to share that with other people. So it's fascinating to hear how that is part of the origin of the Queer Chameleon. And it's really exciting to hear how Amee plans to build on her platform and the wonderful partnerships and collaborations that she has put in place as well. It was fascinating, lovely hearing about her own story, her journey to discovering herself, her love of pink, and how those chat rooms as a teenager led to her own realizations about who she is, the wonderful human she is. Amee, I am so grateful that I got the chance to chat to you and hear more about your story and to shine a light on the incredible human behind the queer chameleon that we all know and love. Thank you so much. I hope to see you soon. I hope that if you listened, you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, share, and go and buy the Queer Chameleon book. Get it from a queer retailer, and then yeah, keep up with all the exciting news that she has coming up. Cheers, everyone.